Yes.
أيوة.
We are live now.
Great. So we're live on Facebook. إذا نبدأ الآن. هي 5:00 في توقيت بيروت. نبدأ الآن. مساء الخير. أنا لياس قطار، مسؤول النشر والتحرير في المجلس العربي للعلوم الاجتماعية. أهلا بكم وبكن في حلقة النقاش الثالثة في سلسلة حلقات نقاش الذكرى العاشرة لتأسيس المجلس العربي للعلوم الاجتماعية. أرحب بداية بضيوفنا المحاضرين والمحاضرات وبجميع من انضم إلينا عبر منصة زوم وعبر صفحة المجلس في فيسبوك، حيث تبث هذه الحلقة بصورة حية الآن. قبل أن نستهل هذه الحلقة أشير إلى نقطتين رئيسيتين. أولاً، تعقد هذه الحلقة باللغتين الإنجليزية والعربية مع ترجمة فورية إلى اللغات العربية والإنجليزية والإسبانية، متاحة للمسجلين والمسجلات عبر منصة زوم. ببساطة يمكنكم متابعة هذه الحلقة بإحدى هذه اللغات الثلاث من خلال خانة قنوات الترجمة أسفل شاشة زوم. أما لمن يرغب في متابعة الحلقة برمتها باللغة العربية فعليه اختيار القناة الصينية Chinese Channel. ثانياً، هي حلقة نقاش بامتياز، لذا ندعوكم إلى طرح أي سؤال على المحاضرين والمحاضرات من خلال خانة سؤال وجواب Q&A Question et Réponse عبر منصة زوم، وخانة التعليق comment أو commentaire عبر فيسبوك. في نهاية الحلقة ننقل هذه الأسئلة بقدر ما يتيح لنا وقتنا المتبقي إلى المحاضرين والمحاضرات. الآن ومن دون تأخير أنقل الكلمة إلى ميسرة هذه الحلقة، مديرة مشروع المرصد العربي للعلوم الاجتماعية في المجلس العربي للعلوم الاجتماعية، زميلتي ندى شية. تفضلي ندى.
شكرا الياس. مساء الخير، صباح الخير، أهلا وسهلا بالجميع، بالزملاء والمحاضرين والمحاضرات وبجميع يلي انضموا لهيدي الحلقة عبر زوم أو فيسبوك، وخصوصا أنه اليوم يوم عطلة للجميع. اليوم عندنا 6 محاضرات من قبل اختصاصيين وشركاء للمجلس. أول 4 محاضرات ستكون بالإنجليزية وآخر 2 بالعربية. تليها مثل ما قال الياس حلقة نقاش حول هذا الموضوع المهم وموضوع الساعة. فأنا هلأ رح انتقل للإنجليزية، فرجاء تعديل اللغة إذا أردتم متابعتها بغير لغة. So welcome to our 6 panelists and to those attending through Zoom and Facebook. We have a great panel of experts and partners who will talk about the timely issue of knowledge as a public good and about principles and applications of open social science and data management. They will cover it from different regional perspectives and will also highlight some relevant initiatives in the Arab region. This webinar is co-organized with the Economic Research Forum, ERF, a regional organization based in Cairo, the Latin American Council of Social Sciences, CLACSO, a regional organization based in Buenos Aires, and the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. All 3 are sister organizations dedicated to promoting quality research in different fields of the social sciences and to open access of knowledge. We certainly have a lot to learn from their long experiences through our collaborations with them. With the Odum Institute for Research in Social Science at UNC at Chapel Hill, which is the oldest social science research institute in the US, we are working closely on the Arab Public Data Initiative, through which the ACSS is working on social science data management and the repository, the ACSS Dataverse, as well as on training programs. The Economic Research Forum is a sister regional network that has the same interest of supporting the production of high-quality research and providing free access to quality curated data sets for reuse. It shares with the ACSS a common network, and the ERF Managing Director, Dr. Ibrahim Al-Badawi, is on the advisory committee of the ACSS Dataverse. Dr. Ragi Asad, who's an ERF board member, is also on the ACSS the ACS Dataverse Advisory Committee, as well as a founding member of the ACSS. The CLACSO is another regional and international network committed to cross-regional research and South-South collaboration in the social sciences. It is indeed a leader in advocating for open access and open science and providing models and creating vehicles for doing so. The ACSS is collaborating with CLACSO on creating joint working groups in security studies, on higher education, as well as working together on open access. Before I pass it on to the panelists, allow me to take a couple of minutes to talk about what the ACSS is doing on this issue. My prerogative as a chair. The ACSS has been working since its establishment on the documentation of the infrastructure of higher education and of knowledge production of social sciences and humanities research in the Arab region. This documentation confirmed that quantity of universities, research centers, periodicals in the region is not an obstacle for the region to become a knowledge society that generates and uses knowledge and passes it on to future generations. However, accessibility of research data and outputs is one of the obstacles to improving the quality of research. Research data is a valuable resource that, with proper planning and management, contributes to open science and to better quality research. So 3 years ago, the ACSS started focusing on social science data management and open access in order to promote the norm of data archiving and sharing among social scientists and research institutions in the region, and also to raise awareness about knowledge as a public good. In our work on this, we focused on 2 areas. First, we created an interdisciplinary social science archive, a hub to preserve and facilitate access to social science data sets on and in the Arab region. The archive is called the ACSS Dataverse. The second area is building capacity in making data open. The ACSS held and will keep holding a series of trainings that brought together those who create social science data and those who archive it. Social science researchers, administrators, and librarians in the region from academic and non-academic institutions in various sectors, public, private, NGO. These training introduce principles like fair data principles, best practices, and tools of data management. In addition to contributing to data literacy, we hope these trainings will create a social science data management network or communities of practice in the region. Producing data, managing and curating it, sharing it, and using it are important steps in the building of robust research infrastructures and producing high-quality outputs. This requires collaborations between many and different kinds of institutions, universities, research centers, public and private entities, and so on. We hope that this panel is one step in initiating regional and cross-regional collaborations. I will stop here and will now give the floor to the panelists. The first 4 presentations will be in English and the last 2 in Arabic, just so for those who want to switch to another language. Our first presenter today is Dr. Ragi Asad. He is professor at the Humphrey School of Public Affairs at the University of Minnesota, where he co-chairs the Master of Development Practice program. He has been a research fellow of the ERF, Economic Research Forum, since 1994, and currently serves as a member of its board of trustees. Under the auspices of ERF, he led the design and implementation of several longitudinal surveys of labor market conditions in Arab countries, all of which are currently available for public use. He is a founding member of the ACSS and is also a former member of the board of trustees of the ACSS. He is also on the ACSS Dataverse Advisory Committee. He will today present on regional work on open access and its evolution. Ragi, the floor is yours and you have 15 minutes.
Thank you very much, Nada. So let me share my screen. I will... So this is, I'm going to be talking today about the open access for microdata in the Arab world, and in particularly about the Economic Research Forum's OAMD initiative, which stands for Open Access Microdata Initiative. So the primary principle that I'm going to be discussing today is the principle of data as essential infrastructure for social and economic research, and in particular, the idea of data as a public good. Like any public good, the value that you get from it is by having as many people as possible use it and not controlling access to it. And like public goods, data can be used by many people without reducing its value. and you can get a huge amounts of value the more people can use it. And so in research, however, when I started my career as a researcher about 35 years ago in the Arab world, there was hardly any open access microdata. All you could find were tables produced by statistical offices or other organizations, but nobody shared microdata. Microdata, I mean by that, data at the unit level. So if the unit is an individual or a household or a firm, you get data on each one of these units. Of course, they're anonymized so that you cannot identify who they are, but the data is still made available at the unit level. This kind of data has now become essential for many fields of economic and social research because of advancement in statistical software and computing power, that the idea of having a ready-made tabulation is almost obsolete for researchers. That essentially you want to create your own analysis, your own tables if necessary, but also more sophisticated analysis using this kind of data product, which is the microdata. And in fact, now research in many areas of social sciences is almost impossible unless you have access to that kind of data. Now, when you ask for this kind of data from many statistical offices, they call it raw data. And I want to make a distinction that what we're asking for is not raw data right the way it comes from the field with all of the identifying information and all of the issues that are with it. We ask for public use microdata samples. So these are samples that are designed specifically for public use, which means that they have all the protections for confidentiality. They may be harmonized across different surveys, different rounds of a survey, and across different surveys in different countries. And they are very well, they have significant documentation, which is called metadata, to be able to allow for its use. So we're talking about harmonized and anonymized microdata with documentation as a basic data product that every research project that collects data and including public national statistical offices should be making available to others. Now, researchers, of course, have the right to keep the data they collect for a certain amount of time in order to publish from it. But I think there's an obligation after a certain period of time, which I think should be limited to about 1 year, where the data needs to become available to the public so that you can get as much benefit from it as possible. It's like the same idea that pharmaceutical companies keep the patent over the medication for a certain amount of time, and then they have to make it public so that the maximum amount of benefit can be obtained from that medication. And I think that amount of time, the shorter it is, the better, while allowing the researchers to get their publications. So I want to talk about the Economic Research Forum's Open Access Microdata Initiative, which you can access on this website, and we'll look at the website in a minute. Now, ERF started the idea of disseminating microdata to researchers in 1999 with the dissemination of the first Egypt labor market panel survey of 1998. That's a survey that I had organized, and because of the trouble that I had as a researcher before that to try and get access to microdata on labor markets, in fact, I had to beg and steal and do all kinds of things to get data. I committed to the idea that any data that I'm involved in collecting has to be made public. And we had an agreement with the Egyptian Central Statistical Office, CAPMAS, to undertake the survey. So they actually collected the data. And for the very first time in 1999, they agreed to publicly disseminate the microdata to researchers. And that opened up the possibility of this microdata dissemination. Now, following that first survey, there were a number of other of these labor market panel surveys that ERF made available, including 3 other waves in Jordan, in Egypt, 2 waves in Jordan, 1 wave in Tunisia. But the breakthrough came in 2013 when the O1D initiative was officially launched, and there was an agreements made with several national statistical offices to disseminate their own official data sets after they were cleaned and harmonized and made into a public use file. So the kinds of microdata that are now available through the O1D initiative are some of the most important data sets that household surveys that statistical offices produce, household income and expenditure surveys, and labor force surveys. So these are in gray here, indicating that these are central surveys that are produced by statistical offices. We have the labor market panel surveys that I mentioned earlier. This year, we've added the COVID-19 MENA monitor surveys, which are rapid phone surveys to look at the effects of COVID-19 crisis on the economies of a number of Arab countries. We have surveys on higher education graduates, surveys on young people, and harmonized household surveys. So this is on the household side. They also have data on the firm and sector, so the side of the economy on the firms and enterprise side, which I'm going to talk less about here. I'm going to just quickly visit the portal. So this is the part of the portal that has all the individual data sets, but more useful is if you go to the portal to look at the collections of data. You will see all those data collections that I talked about, the COVID MENA monitor, the income and expenditure surveys, the labor market surveys, the labor force surveys, etc. So right now, these are publicly available. Researchers have to register in order to get access to the actual microdata, but they can access all the documentation and the metadata without registration. These are the countries that are currently participating. You've got Egypt, Jordan, Palestine, Tunisia, Iraq, Sudan, Somalia, Yemen, so a pretty broad range of countries. You have some pretty clear absences. So outside the COVID monitor survey, the CMM, which is a COVID MENA monitor, Morocco is almost absent from all the other surveys. And this is a real shame. Morocco, as a relatively open country in other ways, has not been as forthcoming in terms of sharing data. But these are currently, there are 48 labor force surveys, so multiple years for each country, 28 household income and expenditure surveys, and as you can see, some of these other surveys as well. Now, these data, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the most recent addition, which is the COVID MENA monitor survey. As I said, this is a rapid phone survey that is done on a panel of households, 2,000 households per country and 500 firms per country. And they're being, in some cases, interviewed 4 times in Tunisia and Morocco, for example. 4 times, 3 waves are planned for Jordan, 2 waves in Egypt, and 1 wave in Sudan. And already the first wave is available on the ERF website and has been downloaded 81 times just since January 2021. Wave 2, which covers February of 2021, is actually going to be made available in a few days. So this is a really important new resource for anybody who wants to know what are the effects of the COVID crisis over the past year on these 5 MENA countries. So ERF has a certain process that it follows in order to make data available for public use and dissemination. You collect and acquire new data sets, which requires a lot of communications with the national statistical offices and with researchers, because some of this data is by research organizations or researchers as individuals. You have a processing, cleaning, and harmonizing. So the idea here is that you want data set from the same series, which often change in design over time. Also across multiple countries, the same type of data set, like a labor force survey, to have exactly the same variables and the same categories. But you try to do that, you try to do the harmonization without losing any information, so that there is a a very clever way of creating the categories so that you have the less detailed categories which are comparable, but then you can get more detail if you want it. And then there's a validating of the process data, and then documentation and wide dissemination of the data. So far, the ERF has had a great deal of success in the growth of users of the data. And you can see the numbers have grown significantly since 2013. 43% of the data users are from the ERF region. Please excuse the typo here, it's the ERF region. And then the rest are from outside the ERF regions, researchers all over the world. And you can see how there's been really quite a rapid growth rate in the users. There's also been a huge growth rate in the number of downloads of actual surveys accessed, data sets accessed over the past few years. So just in the last since the end of 2019, there's been nearly 2,000 additional downloads. So to conclude, I want to say that this initiative made an enormous difference, at least in the areas of research that I work on, which are on labor markets and human development in the Arab countries. They really put the Arab countries on the map in terms of research, where data access was and still is in many cases a huge barrier. The sort of the fruit that this kind of initiative bears takes time. It doesn't happen immediately, because first you have to have the data becoming available, and then the researchers, especially the young researchers, start coming into the field. Because with no data, there are often no researchers who want to choose that field of research. And it's only when the data is available for a couple of years that it starts attracting young researchers who want to do PhDs and who want to do master's degrees, etc., to come into a field. And we are seeing this bearing fruit as a result of this data infrastructure. Now, there is a need to coordinate with other data dissemination initiatives like the ACSS Dataverse, which Charles is going to talk about later on today. And there's also the IPUMS International, which is an initiative of the University of Minnesota Population Center to make available census data, micro census data from all over the world. And there are also, but there's still large gaps that exist in terms of the countries covered, in terms of the years represented, and in terms of how timely the data becomes available on the ERF website. I do encourage as many researchers as possible who and research organizations that collect systematic data sets of a large site to participate in making the data available. For example, the Population Council is the one that collected the youth surveys, and they agreed to make them available on the ERF website. And I think that the relationships with national statistical offices is also one that is in constant need of development. Now, the reason I think open access data that is disseminated is really essential is not just because you want to make data infrastructure available, it's because you want to preserve data. And I've seen many data sets, very valuable data sets, disappearing from humanity. Essentially, this is the patrimony of humanity disappearing because statistical offices are not concerned about historical data. Once the data gets a little old, they actually lose it. It sits on somebody's computer, and that computer gets obsolete, and it's gone. And the same thing I would say for individual researchers and other research organizations. Once the research project is over, the data has no value to them and it gets lost. So I think preserving data, integrating it, harmonizing it, and disseminating it is a huge necessary infrastructural service that needs to be done to preserve this knowledge for humanity. Thank you very much. So I will stop sharing now. Nada, you're muted.
Nada, you have to unmute.
Thank you, Ragi. Now I want to invite Dr. Dominique Babini and Dr. Laura Rovelli for a joint presentation. Dr. Dominique Babini is the Open Access Social Science Advisor and previously Repository Manager at the Claxo in Argentina, and she holds a doctoral degree in Political Science. Dr. Laura Rovelli is coordinator of Claxo's Latin American Forum for Research Assessment, FOLIC, and holds a doctoral in Political Science as well. Claxo is a member of many advisory boards working on open access. Declaration on Research Assessment, DORA, America, Open Knowledge, National System of Digital Repositories at the Ministry of Science in Argentina, UNESCO, Open Science Partnership, Comité pour la Science Ouverte in France, Open Access India, International Science Council Scoping Group on the Future of Scientific Publishing, Coalition Publica in Canada, community-led open publication infrastructures for monograph Scopum. Very active in open access. Dominique and Laura will talk about open access from another regional perspective. Dominique and Laura, the floor is yours and you have 20 minutes.
Thank you very much, Nada. Thank you to Acs for your invitation. Here I share my screen. Do you see me? Yes. On behalf of Claxo, the Latin American Council of Social Sciences, and on behalf of the Executive Secretary of Claxo, Karina Battiani, our congratulations to ACSS in its 10th anniversary. We have shared many activities in the past years, and we also share both organizations' concerns about privatization of knowledge, because we need social sciences for the public good, and we need our social science researchers to be able to not only access and read social sciences from the world, but also to be able to publish and to be read. Today, the reality is that 5 large commercial publishing houses have the control of the science system because they publish what is called the mainstream journals, where we are making the transition from paying subscriptions to pay to publish in open access in a system where the labor of researchers is not paid, because researchers provide their manuscript, provide their review for free to the industry, which is one of the most profitable industries in the world. And that same industry is producing the indicators for evaluation, where what is rewarded is publishing in that package of journals, which is named mainstream journals. And now there's a transition to open science, and we are seeing the 5 big companies purchasing scholar-led initiatives to manage also the open science profit. It's difficult to understand why governments, the academia, is supporting scholarly communication led by an industry which is one of the most profitable industries of the world, and it is paid with funds that come for research. The results, if we look at the Web of Science, is that the research output from the developing regions is very poorly represented in the indexing systems that are used to assess the research results of developing regions also. So we have no incentives in publishing in local languages, which is a conversation we need in social sciences with our local audience, and assessment systems favors only writing and publishing in English in the mainstream journals. If we look at the global, let's see if I can reduce my screen, sorry. If we look at the global Sustainable Development Goals. And if we look at the problems and needs we have in each region, in each developing regions, we need as much local as global research results, because we need those contributions, those voices to be participating in solving our needs and our problems. So we need an open science which is situated in the context where we live. We need to have inclusive infrastructures for open data, for open code, for open peer review, for citizen science, for preprint, for open research data. We need to think who is deciding what content is included and what content is excluded, which voices are included and which voices are excluded from the global conversation and from the local conversation of science. And for whom are we opening research? For which audiences? In what formats? Are we protecting bibliodiversity? Are we protecting multilingualism to include more voices? We need a commons. We need a global scholarly communication and open science commons that is more efficient and inclusive than the present scholarly communication system led by the industry. We need a system that is governed by the scholarly community. Here you have only a few examples of the incredible diversity of scholar-led non-profit initiatives that can contribute to open science being more participative and more inclusive. From the traditional institutional repositories to the data repositories to platforms for publishing collaborative and cooperatively, all these initiatives are valid. And 70% of the quality open access journals in the directory do not charge APCs. So we support the DORA recommendation. Do not use journal-based metrics, such as a journal impact factor, as a surrogate measure of the quality of individual research articles. Which has been our path to open science in the region, in Latin America, and in Claxo in particular. Today, after 20 years of open access, we are a region in open access. 95% of our journals in Latin America, quality journals in Latin America, are open access with no APCs. We have the diamond model. Journals which are run mainly with Open Journal System, the free open software for managing the complete editorial process. And in the past decade, we started to have open access legislation in Peru, in Mexico, in Argentina, and policies in all countries nearly, requiring that research publications and data be in open repositories. We have very recent trends in open science policies, and two of our main challenges is advance in open access to research data. I was hearing, Raghi, your interesting presentation, and we look forward with Laura to hear the other presentations. It's interesting, the concept we have to advance. We are presenting data to new generations of researchers so they work more with data, and we need to strengthen interregional cooperation in social science data sharing. And we need also to cooperate in changing the research assessment procedures, which reward publishing in journals and books in the mainstream, but do not look at what is published in quality venues within our regions. What happens in our network? Claxo is mainly a research network in Latin America of social science institutions. What Claxo has undertaken, we have about 100 working groups with researchers from all the region. And 70% of participants are researchers, but it is required that 30% of participants come from other social actors concerned with the issues which are being researched in the research group. Since last year, in the grant calls, we already require where are the results going to be published in open access. From the start, it has to be decided. So we can contribute that the complete research cycle will think about that issue. All Claxos books are in open access, and Claxos repository has already now 100,000 full text from its member institute, and it's starting to have data sets. And we advocate worldwide and in our region for non-commercial open access and open science. And with Redalika Milika, we have a joint collection of more than 1,000 quality social science open access journals. And other members of Claxo also index their journals with Latindex and Cielo, and also in institutional repositories. Which is the results? Millions and millions of downloads each month, which are distributed. 75% of use of all these open access resources in Latin America come from the academy. Mainly students, professors, and researchers. And 25% of use comes from outside the academia, from the industry, from professional practice, personal use, citizens participating in science projects. Which are our concerns? Our main concerns are that we have little funds for research. And we are concerned that now the support of the transition of the industry from subscriptions to APCs to ensure the outrageous profits of the industry will harm our developing regions, because we will see underfunding of community-owned infrastructures. So we should prioritize and ask for more funding dedicated to non-commercial, non-APC community-based infrastructures. We see a weak international voice for cooperative and interoperability among community-owned infrastructure. We need more collective action. We need to push the Coalition S to fund also the Diamond open access model, the non-commercial open access models. And we need researchers to be rewarded when publishing in quality venues, independent of the prestige industry. Quality venues, that has to be rewarded. And why not reward peer review of contents in our community-owned infrastructures? For these issues, please, Laura, coordinator of FOLEC, the Forum Latin American Forum for Research Assessment, will continue this presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dominique. Thank you to Nada and Elias for the excellent coordination, and to the Acs for this invitation. So I will continue with the focus on research assessment. The big question for us, what about research assessment in the social sciences and its impact in open access scholarly communications? From Claxo, from the executive secretary, Karina Battiani, Pablo Omaro as research director, Dominique Babini, Fernanda Beigel as advisor of FOLEC, and me in the coordination of FOLEC, we think that there is a tight relationship between open access, research assessment, and open science. You well know that in the last 10 years, there is a proliferation of different declarations, principles, statements, studies, and reports worldwide about responsible research assessment. We have the DORA Declaration, the Leiden Manifesto, the Hong Kong Principles. Last year, the virtual conference promoted by the Global Research Council, and the report on the changing role of funders in responsible research assessment, also the creation of the European Network for Research Evaluation in the Social Sciences and Humanities, NRESH, and we also have the contribution of the JUSI call for open science and bibliodiversity, and also the Helsinki initiative that Claxo takes into consideration to promote language diversity in research assessment and funding systems. From the Latin American landscape, we would like to present the initiative of FOLEC. As you know, FOLEC is a regional space for debate and exchange on the meanings, policies, and practices of research evaluation in the region from a perspective, as Dominique has mentioned, that stresses the open, common, and public domain of knowledge committed with our societies. We have a first FOLEC forum in 2019 in the city of Mexico and co-organized with the CONACYT of Mexico. And last year, from the FOLEC team, we produced and published a series of documents that are called Towards a Transformation of Scientific Research Assessment in Latin America and the Caribbean that we would like to share with you all. You can download it from our page. And there we work on an evaluation on research assessment in the region, a diagnosis and proposals for transformation, and a declaration of principles which the ACSS has supported. We also conducted 2 regional consultations with specialists in research assessment and directors from Claxo's members centers to discuss these initiatives. At present, I would like to strengthen the fact that FOLEC has more than 30 allied organizations and institutions of science, technology, and higher education supporting this initiative. In relation to the diagnosis, please let me highlight some of the topics that Dominique has already mentioned. From FOLEC, we consider that research assessment policies based on the incentives for publishing in journals with impact factor affect local autonomy of agenda, discourage open access, good practices, and social interaction. Besides, they are increasing science commercialization processes and also academic productivism, but not necessarily relevant research production. There is also a distortion of quality excellence definition, and particularly in our field, the social sciences, the humanities, and arts, there are specific obstacles related with the style of publishing and expression that we have, and also in our region with the peripheral condition of the publications in this field in Latin America. So our proposals have to do with more equality, diversity, and inclusion of languages, cultures, knowledges, in an interdisciplinary dialogue in order to strengthen research evaluation procedures, guaranteeing women representation in assessment instances and processes in a minimum of parity. We also consider that it's vital to redefine social relevance involving a community-oriented concept of excellence. As Dominique mentioned before, we promote introduction of open science, innovative peer reviewing practices, and as was mentioned in the first exposition, we would like to promote the creation of a use of diversity of databases that reflect both the production disseminated in international repositories as well as in regional and national databases. And for that, we need of your contribution and support. We would like also to promote the revalue of a bibliodiversity and the research publication in academic books that it's so idiosyncratic of the social sciences, by encouraging, for example, the description of the review processes of book contents, which research results, and include a Creative Commons license to comply with the regulations in open access internationally. And also it's advisable that expected societal impacts in social science and humanities should be specified either in a qualitative or quantitative way, or both. And of course, transparency and participation is fundamental in order to strengthen research evaluation. We consider that introducing a reform of research assessment is necessary, and also it excellence definition and focusing on high quality and relevant research assessment. The actions that we have been taking internationally, FOLEC participates in the steering committee and recently in the advisory board of DORA. FOLEC has also carried out an international meeting that had the participation of Seteni Jami from the ACSS towards a transformation of social science and humanities research assessment last year. And FOLEC has been recognized among the 15 international mobilizers of research assessment evaluation by the Global Research Council recently. Let me also comment the fact that CLACSO and FOLEC has participated in the regional consultation of UNESCO, and Fernanda Beigel is the chair of the Latin American representation for the reformulation of the Open Science Initiative. So the new, to conclude, the next steps of FOLEC involve publishing 4 brief advocacy papers to discuss regionally and internationally on different topics related with research assessment. We are carrying out a research project on responsible research assessment in international funding calls of scientific institutions. And we would like to reach a common proposal on research assessment reform to be presented at the 9th CLACSO Latin American and Caribbean Social Science Conference, which one of the axes of this conference is Science, Technology and Society, Challenges of Knowledge and Evaluation. And we expect to have your participation there too. So thank you very much for this invitation, and it's an honor to dialogue with you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Dominique and Laura. Now off to, we have Dr. Charles Kurzman. He is a professor of sociology and co-director of the Center for Middle East and Islamic Studies at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. He specializes in Middle East and Islamic studies. He is author of The Missing Martyr, Democracy Denied, and The Unthinkable Revolution in Iran. And he is also the editor of the anthologies Liberal Islam and Modernist Islam. He is the co-chair of the ACSS Advisory Committee, along with the ACSS Director General, Dr. Seteni Jami. He will talk about the Dataverse and data preservation for the public good. Charles, the floor is yours, and you have 15 minutes.
Thank you very much. I hope the screen is showing properly. Thank you. I want to thank the Arab Council for the Social Sciences for inviting me to participate in this panel. and I would like to congratulate the ACSS on its 10th anniversary. It has been an honor to work with the ACSS for the past several years on this initiative, the ACSS Dataverse, that we see the homepage on your screen. This Dataverse is like the microdata archive of the Economic Research Forum, a data archive that preserves, publishes, and makes available to researchers data produced in and on the Arab region, across the social sciences, whether quantitative or qualitative, de-identified data that will be preserved for future generations of researchers. This is part of a global effort that across the world, spearheaded in part by the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, as well as other international bodies. Very pleased to have here some of the participants in this UNESCO Open Science Initiative. And I want to thank them for their work on this important enterprise. Creating more openness in social science so that data and research can be made available to a wider network of researchers, not just now, but also in the future. The use of the data is part of the Sustainable Development Goals that were stated by the United Nations, and the idea of sustainable development data, that is the creation of mechanisms to monitor and assess achievement of these broad global goals, is also an important component. How can we know whether we're achieving these goals unless we are collecting information and checking that? And that information needs also to be sustainable. The data must also be sustainable, preserved, and made available for researchers. Just last year, the World Data Forum was held in virtual format because of the COVID-19 pandemic, where scholars, researchers, data scientists from around the world have attempted to create collaborations that will allow data to be shared on a global scale rather than maintained privately, where it will not do as much good. The ACSS Dataverse is part of a network of data archives around the world. Dataverse.org is the homepage for this Dataverse project. The word Dataverse itself, bringing together in English, with apologies, the word data and universe. So it becomes a Dataverse where all of this material, research material, is being deposited, preserved, processed, de-identified, so that confidentiality is maintained of the research subjects, and then stored and made available. The ACSS Dataverse was the first in this network in the Arab region. This Dataverse software is free, open source software, and constantly being updated and improved. And so being part of this network is a low-cost way to make sure that research in the Arab region is being included in this global network. I'd like to give two examples of data that was not preserved, or at least is not currently available, to exemplify the comments that Dr. Assad made about the danger of losing part of the research heritage, part of the legacy that we as researchers are creating when we do not archive data in these kinds of public data archives. The first is a book from over 50 years ago by an American sociologist, Daniel Lerner, who wrote a book, The Passing of Traditional Society, Modernizing the Middle East. Now, the theoretical apparatus of this book is no longer considered current. Notice also that the study is based on a survey conducted in 1950 in a half dozen countries in the MENA region and also in Greece. These surveys were among the first surveys ever conducted in the region, but they have not been preserved. If they had been preserved, we could do follow-up surveys today, compare the responses, and see whether long-term trends are visible on the items that they thought to collect in 1950. So here is a missed opportunity, a lost opportunity, when the data retires along with when the scholar retires. I'll give another example. This is somewhat more current. This is an article that I noticed in a journal in Saudi Arabia that looks at marriage contracts in the city of Jeddah in Saudi Arabia from 1979 to 1990, so roughly a dozen years. And this is an empirical study with data tables presented here on trends in marriages in this city, Jeddah. Notice, for example, in this chart, the second line of data shows the percentage of people getting married who are under 20 years old. And it drops from 40% and higher in 1979, 1398 or 1402 by different Arab calendars, and then continues to drop to roughly 33%. I'm sorry, roughly 28% a dozen years later. In other words, young people are a smaller share of teenagers, are a smaller share of marriages in this city across that decade. Another table here is whether there were conditions written into the marriage contract. And the percentage with conditions or without conditions, this top line, drops from 87% to 56%. A very dramatic drop, suggesting more conditions are being added. And you see some of these conditions are for living in one's home or additional education or work. These are significant social changes observed in this study over the course of a decade in a single city. Now, we would like to be able to look at whether the conditions were being added by the younger or the older women, and the change, whether these two things are correlated with each other. But without the microdata, that is, without the original responses, we have no way to combine these two tables and to analyze them together. So here's a data set that would be interesting to have the microdata preserved. I'm going to finish with an example of a data set that is available in the ACSS Dataverse. And this is a survey that was conducted in 2014 in 7 countries. It's called the Arab Transformations Project. And these surveys asked a variety of questions on political, social, and economic issues for nationally representative samples to the extent that they were able in 7 countries. And because these data sets are available, future projects, not only can a researcher now register with the ACSS Dataverse for free, download this data set and analyze it for their own projects, but if somebody were to conduct a new survey in these countries, perhaps use some of the same questions so that we can look at change over time. The value of this research is multiplied by having the data available for future researchers. I encourage all of you to think yourself, do you have data that might be valuable, that was worth collecting and therefore is worth preserving? And would you consider publishing your data set with the ACSS Dataverse? If so, please contact our colleagues at the Arab Council for the Social Sciences. Nada Shaya, who is our moderator, is leading the project for the ACSS. I am honored to be working with the project here from North Carolina, along with my colleagues in the Odum Institute for Research in Social Science, which runs another Dataverse and is helping with some of the technical side. This is a project that has global implications and also local impact. I thank you for listening. I look forward to seeing your data sets also on the ACSS Dataverse. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. I just put the email if anybody wishes to deposit their data sets in the ACSS Dataverse, to contact dataverse@theacss.org, and of course you can contact me, chaya@theacss.org. Now we have our final 2 presentations and they will be in Arabic, so we'll switch to Arabic. So please take a second to adjust the language if you need that. عندنا دكتور مبروك بوتقوقة، هو أستاذ أنثروبولوجيا في جامعة باتنا 1 في الجزائر. تتركز اهتماماته على أنثروبولوجيا التراث والأنثروبولوجيا الرقمية. هو مؤسس ورئيس تحرير مجلة أنثروبولوجيا، المجلة العربية لدراسات الأنثروبولوجية المعاصرة، والمؤسس والمشرف العام لمركز فاعلون للبحث في الأنثروبولوجيا والعلوم الإنسانية والاجتماعية. هو أيضاً مؤسس ومدير موقع أرانثروبوس، وهذا الموقع هو الأول والأكبر عن الأنثروبولوجيا في المنطقة العربية، وهذا الموقع هو موضوع مداخلته اليوم. وهو أيضاً عضو في مجلس أمناء المجلس العربي للعلوم الاجتماعية. الكلمة لك مبروك، ولديك 10 دقائق.
شكراً ندى. بداية أستغل هذه الفرصة لأوجه التهنئة للمجلس العربي ممثلاً في فريق عمله وكل أعضائه بمناسبة الذكرى 10 لتأسيسه. أنا سعيد جداً لتواجدي معكم اليوم للحديث حول المعرفة من أجل الصالح العام، وسأحاول أن أعرض في عجالة إحدى التجارب التي ساهمت فيها في هذا المجال، وهي تجربة موقع أرانثروبوس. فموقع أرانثروبوس عنوان مداخلتي: موقع أرانثروبوس منصة لنشر الفكر الأنثروبولوجي. طبعا أنا لأضعكم في الصورة أحب فقط أن أشير إلى أن تخصصي القاعدي الجامعي هو تخصص تقني، بمعنى أني درست البيولوجيا ثم درست فيما بعد هندسة الكمبيوتر، ولم أتي إلى العلوم الاجتماعية إلا منذ 10 سنوات. وأثناء انتقالي إلى العلوم الاجتماعية هالني الحالة المزرية للمحتوى الرقمي للعلوم الاجتماعية على شبكة الإنترنت، خاصة المكتوب منه باللغة العربية. هذا الأمر يعني أرقني كثيرا وجعلني أفكر في القيام بشيء من أجل تغطية هذه الفجوة. ويعني في سنة 2010 على ما أتذكر عقد في جامعة بسا عقد الملتقى الدولي حول البحث السوسيو-أنثروبولوجي في العالم العربي، وكانت للمشاركين مناقشات كثيرة حول الوضعية البائسة والمزرية التي تعيشها الأنثروبولوجيا في العالم العربي. ومن هنا جاءتني فكرة إطلاق موقع يكون بمثابة منصة لتجميع ونشر الفكر الأنثروبولوجي في المنطقة العربية. وباشرت العمل على المشروع من خلال التحضيرات المادية وشراء الاستضافة واسم النطاق وتصميم الواجهة وتجهيز قاعدة البيانات، وأطلقت الموقع على الخط تحت اسم أرونتروبوس، وهي اختصار لأرابيك أنثروبولوجي، في 22 من شهر فبراير سنة 2010. وبالتالي يكون الموقع يعني سنة 2021 قد أكمل عامه 11. طبعا لأضعكم في الصورة أيضا اسمحوا لي أن أعرض لكم بعض المعلومات. إن البحث مثلا على محرك البحث جوجل لكلمة أنثروبولوجي باللغة الإنجليزية يعيد لنا ما مجموعه 169 مليون نتيجة. في اللغة الفرنسية يعيد لنا 63 مليون نتيجة. في اللغة العربية تخيلوا أنه في سنة 2013 كانت يعني نتائج لا تتعدى 60,000 نتيجة، لترتفع سنة 2017 إلى 150,000، وفي سنة 2021 إلى 1,250,000 نتيجة، وهو عدد صغير إذا قارناه ب 169 مليون من نتائج البحث التي يعيدها المصطلح الإنجليزي. ومن هنا فهذا الموقع هو محاولة لسد هذه الثغرة الكبيرة جدا، وإن كانت محاولة شديدة التواضع في ظل كبر المهام. هذا الموقع يعني أشير ثانيا إلى أهمية الموقع كموقع مرجعي في التقرير الأول للمرصد العربي للعلوم الاجتماعية الصادر في ديسمبر 2015 عن المركز العربي للعلوم الاجتماعية في بيروت، وهو التقرير الذي أعده الدكتور محمد بامية رفقة مجموعة من الباحثين العرب تحت إشراف مديرة المجلس الدكتورة ستناي شامي. دعوني يعني أسرد لكم بعض المجزوءات التي وردت في التقرير والتي تبين الدور الذي قام به الموقع. على سبيل المثال ذكر أن الموقع هو أحد المبادرات العلمية المستقلة التي تحصر حضورها في ذلك الفضاء وتقدم الفضاء هنا مقصود به الفضاء الرقمي، وتقدم نفسها كنموذج رائد في توظيفه لأهداف علمية. كذلك يشكل الموقع استثناء لما هو معهود. يبرز الموقع تجربة ثرية تستخدم الفضاء الإلكتروني بإمكانياته المختلفة. كذلك يعتبر الموقع إضافة مهمة لما تقدمه الدوريات العلمية. كذلك يبرز ظاهرة نادرة من الفهم الموسوعي، ويقدم كونا معرفيا مرتبطا بشكل سهل بأكوان معرفية أخرى. كذلك ذكر أن الموقع معروف في أوساط طلاب الدراسات العليا في مختلف أنحاء الوطن العربي، كما أن الموقع يشكل مساهمة في تشكيل نواة لجماعة علمية ذات خلفية معرفية مترابطة. ربما هذه الاقتباسات التي قدمتها تبين الأثر الطيب للموقع لدى الجماعة العلمية العربية. وعلى سبيل المثال أنه في الأبحاث التي تمت في إطار التقرير أنه من بين 10 طلبة في الدراسات العليا في الجامعة اللبنانية، يعني 10 من 10 كانوا يعرفون الموقع ويزورونه بشكل دائم. دعوني أمر الآن إلى أهم خصائص الموقع. فالموقع كما رأيتم ربما خاصة في إصداره الجديد الويب 2.0 أنه يركز على البساطة في المظهر. فالموقع يركز أولا على الأنثروبولوجيا كعلم وكفكر، ويركز على البساطة وتبسيط الوصول للمعلومة، وكذلك يركز على الوصول والتسهيل
دكتور مبروك، الصوت يتقطع من ناحيتك. دكتور مبروك.
للمبحرين أو للزائرين. وضع الموقع لنفسه أهدافا كثيرة، منها التعريف بتخصص الأنثروبولوجيا، كذلك الخروج بالأنثروبولوجيا إلى الجمهور الواسع، كذلك إنشاء منصة مشتركة تجمع. نعم إلياس.
الصوت يتقطع
منبر
دكتور
رقمي
مبروك.
يساهم في نشر الإنتاج المعرفي للأساتذة والباحثين، وتوفير محتوى علمي تخصصي يساعد الطلبة والباحثين في الوصول إلى الموارد الرقمية. كذلك يسعى المركز بالأنثروبولوجيا للتغلب على النقص الكبير في هذا المجال من خلال توفير عدد من الكتب بصيغة رقمية. خطة عمل تعتمد أساساً على إعادة نشر المقالات العلمية والمقالات المترجمة، والتعريف بأهم ولا أمهات الكتب في التخصص وبرواد الأنثروبولوجيا، كذلك شرح المصطلحات والتعريف بالإصدارات الجديدة والمجلات ذات العلاقة بالتخصص وتغطية بعض الملتقيات. فيما يخص محتويات الموقع، يحتوي الموقع على 4 صفحات رئيسية، أحدها الأولى تعرف بالأنثروبولوجيا، والثاني تطرح مسردا من أهم المراجع الأنثروبولوجية، والثالث مكتبة لتحميل أهم الكتب، وأخيرا تعريف بهيئة تحرير الموقع. تنقسم محتويات الموقع بين قسم المقالات وقسم الإثنوغرافيات المخصص للدراسات الإثنوغرافية، وقسم التيارات الذي يعرف بمختلف التيارات والنظريات الأنثروبولوجية، وقسم الرواد للتعريف بكبار الأنثروبولوجيين، وقسم الكتب، وكذلك قسم المنهجية والمجلات والمصطلحات والملتقيات والمتفرقات وما إلى ذلك. فيما يخص تطور الموقع، في البداية كان عدد الزوار قليلا جدا لا يتجاوز 20 زائرا، وارتفع يعني بعد 3 أشهر إلى 500 زائر، ثم وصل إلى 9000، ثم يعني بعد 2 وصل ما بين 70 إلى 200 ألف زائر شهريا. على سبيل المثال من 13 أبريل 2016 إلى 11 أبريل 2017 زار الموقع 1,700,000 زائر، يعني يمكن أن عدد الزوار تجاوز 11 مليون زائر في يعني للموقع منذ إطلاقه، فيما تجاوزت عدد متابعي على الفيسبوك 10,000 وتويتر كذلك، وبلغت عدد المقالات أكثر من 1000 مقالة. في الختام ما أريد أن أقوله هو أنه رغم أن العرب يشكلون نسبة 5% من سكان العالم، إلا أن المحتوى الرقمي بالمكتوب باللغة العربية في تراجع، فقد كان سنة 2012 ما يساوي 1.6%، وفي 2018 تراجع هذا المحتوى ليصل إلى 0.6%، وهو في تراجع مستمر. ومن هنا يعني من خلال هذا المنبر أوجه نداء لكل الباحثين والأكاديميين والأساتذة لولوج عالم النشر الإلكتروني وإطلاق مواقع شخصية وتعليمية تساهم في التعريف بهوياتهم الأكاديمية ونشر المعرفة العلمية في تخصصاتهم ورفع المستوى التعليمي وزيادة المحتوى الرقمي باللغة العربية. هذا ما أردت أن أقوله، أشكركم على حسن المتابعة، وإليك الكلمة ندى.
شكرا مبروك. هلا عنا اخر محاضره وهي من دكتور ساري حنفي. دكتور ساري حنفي هو استاذ علم الاجتماع في الجامعه الامريكيه في بيروت، ومدير مركز الدراسات العربيه والشرق اوسطيه، ورئيس برنامج الدراسات الاسلاميه فيها. هو رئيس تحرير المجله العربيه لعلم الاجتماع اضافات. هو رئيس الجمعية الدولية لعلم الاجتماع International Sociological Association. قبلها كان نائب رئيس وعضو مجلس أمناء المجلس العربي للعلوم الاجتماعية، وهو عضو مؤسس للمجلس أيضا. هو عضو في اللجنة الاستشارية للACS Dataverse. مؤسس ومدير البوابة الإلكترونية حول الأثر الاجتماعي للبحث العلمي حول العالم العربي اسمها أثر، والتي سيتكلم عنها في مداخلته. أحد أهم كتبه البحث العربي ومجتمع المعرفة، وكتابه الذي صدر حديثاً علوم الشرع والعلوم الاجتماعية نحو تجاوز القطيعة. الكلمة لك ساري، وعندك 10 دقائق.
شكرا كثير ندى، وبدي أشكر المجلس العربي فعلا لهيك ندوة رائعة. وفي الحقيقة يعني محزنة هذه الندوة حتى الآن لما نقارن حالنا كعالم عربي مع أمريكا اللاتينية. يعني مقارنة جنوب بنشوف قد ايه نحن متأخرين في فتح المعلومات البحثية للعالم. اسمحوا لي أشارككم بالباوربوينت تبعي. في الحقيقة مثل ما قالت ندى، في الحقيقة إلي عم اشتغل تقريبا رح أصير شي 10 سنوات بموضوع الإنتاج المعرفي في العالم العربي، وطلعت كتاب بالإنجليزي وبالعربي، وطبعا استمريت كان قبل الكتاب وبعده ما زلت عم بشتغل على موضوع الإشكال المعرفي لما تكون كونية ولا محلية، وإذا المعرفة المنتجة هي منتجة أم لا، يعني produced but not used بطريقة أو بأخرى. إذا أنا بنطلق مثل مايكل بروي صديقي العزيز اللي رئيس الجمعية الدولية لعلم الاجتماع سابقا من سؤالين كبار حتى نحكي على أنشطتنا البحثية. السؤال الأول المعرفة لمن، والسؤال الثاني المعرفة من أجل ماذا. المعرفة لمن هل هي فقط حوار بين مجموعة صغيرة الجماعة العلمية وبالتالي النشر بمجلات محكمة بيقروها عدد كتير محدود من الناس. بإحدى الاستبيانات ببين إنه 9 أشخاص بيقرأ بمتوسط لا شيء نحن بنشتغل عليه وبننشره فقط بالمجلات العلمية، ولا بدنا نحكي مع العموم بمعنى مجتمع مدني، بمعنى متخذي السياسات وإلى آخره. المعرفة من أجل ماذا؟ هل بدنا معرفة فقط خلينا أقول أداتية بمعنى لإيجاد الوسائل، ولا معرفة نقدية بننقد كل السلطات بمجتمعنا؟ في الحقيقة المعرفة إن كانت أداتية ولا نقدية مهمة جدا، يعني مشان ما نفكر إنه يعني لما معرفة بيطلبها جهة إن كانت حكومية أو دولية مشان سياسات معينة مهمة جدا مثل أبحاثنا النقدية يلي بنعمل. في الحقيقة اليوم رح أركز على البوابة الإلكترونية حول الأثر الاجتماعي للبحث العلمي حول ومن العالم العربي أثر، يلي متموضع بمعهد عصام فارس للسياسات العامة والشؤون الدولية في الجامعة الأمريكية ببيروت، واللي أسسته من 3 سنوات بفضل منحة من مؤسسة كارنيجي. بتهدف هاي البوابة إلى إنشاء أرشيف مفتوح لمسار البحث العلمي بكامله، بما فيه نقل المعرفة والأنشطة البحثية المتعلقة بالسياسات العامة والنشر المعرفي للعموم. إذن ما بنوقف على وين النشر الأكاديمي. بيستهدف البحث الذي يجري في العالم العربي أو يتناول العالم العربي موضوعا، وبتعتمد على المعلومات يلي بيقوم فيها الباحثين بإدخالها، وتشمل وصفا لمشاريعهم البحثية ومخرجات تأثيرها الاجتماعي. والاجتماعي هون بتضمن الجوانب الاقتصادية والسياسية والثقافية والمفاهيمية، مش اجتماعي بالمعنى السوسيولوجي. وفيها محرك بحث ممكن يستخدمه أكثر من طرف. حتى الآن في 2100 مشروع بحثي بمجالات من الطب والهندسة وإدارة الأعمال والعلوم الاجتماعية والطبيعية، وفي 10 وعندنا بلوجز بلشنا نشتغله، وقريبا رح يكون كتير فعال ومربوط بالبلوج تبع معهد عصام فارس. ومسرورين إنه عندنا تقريبا منتصف الباحثات النساء ونصفهم رجال. وفي الحقيقة ما زال لبنان بشكل الحجم الأكبر منا، بس في الحقيقة ونأمل بأن العالم العربي كمان ينشط فيها. وإن شاء الله عنا نحن بدأنا بالمرحلة الثانية من المشروع، وإن شاء الله رح يكون في كتير اهتمام بالعالم العربي مش بس بلبنان. ومثل ما بتلاحظين بأنه كل الاختصاصات موجودة هون. في عندنا مجلس استشاري بيرأسه الدكتور طارق متري يلي كان المدير السابق لمعهد عصام فارس، وعندنا من كثير من الدول العربية، بالإضافة لشخصيات باحثين مهمين اشتغلوا على شيء شبيه بأثر. المرحلة الثانية من أثر هي تنظيم 20 ورشة عمل في التواصل العلمي في البلدان العربية. التواصل بمعنى الكوميونيكيشن، كيف بينحكى مع الناس، كيف بينحكى مع المجتمع المدني إلى آخره، كيف بينكتب مقال رأي بالجريدة، كيف بنتحدث مع الباحثين إلى آخره. وتنظيم 10 ورشات عمل تفاعلية بين الباحثين والصحفيين، لأنه في الحقيقة الصحافة العلمية عندنا وضعها كتير صعب بالعالم العربي، ونتمنى بأنه ينجلى هل هو بين الفضاء الأكاديمي والفضاء البحثي، لحتى يتصير في بحث مربوط بمنتجات البحثية. كمان في هدف من المرحلة الثانية هو عمل تول كيت، يعني رزمة من المصادر ومن الأدوات المعرفية باللغة العربية، كيف ممكن واحد يفوت عليها يتعلم كيف ينقل بحث من لغة علمية جارجونال لا مقعرة خليني أقولها، لا مصممة للحوار مع الباحثين وهي مهمة، لا كيف يتحدث بحيث الناس والصحفيين والإعلام يفهمون، ومساعدة الباحثين في مختلف الدول العربية على نقل معارفهم وترجمتها إلى المجتمع وصانع القرار. إذن هي خليني راح بودي نفوت على الويب سايت. اوكي انا اسف، بس خليني نفوت على الويب سايت. اوكي اذا انا عم بعرض عليكم الويب سايت مثل ما شايفين. على فكرة هو موجود ب3 لغات، بالعربي بالفرنسي وبالإنجليزي، مصممينه ل3، وكيف أي باحث بيقدر يدخل بحثه كتير سهل في ذلك. بس أهم شيء من جديد عملناه هو إنه الإعلامي بدل ما دائما يتصل بنفس الناس مشان يحكوا على أي موضوع ما بالتلفزيونات وبالجرايد والى اخره مثل ما العادي، يعني بدل ذلك فيه يتواصل مع الباحث حسب الموضوع بدقة. يعني عم بيشتغل على موضوع البلاستيك سيرجري، على موضوع صغير حتى ممكن يحط وهي. ففيه مثلا مثل ما شايفين مثلا ناخذ اي باحث صوم ابو جودي فيه على فكره يعمل بحث بكلمه، يحط كلمه ما وبيطلع له بيطلع له مشاريع. بس اهم شيء فيه يعمل مسج وفورا يبعث له ايميل انه اذا بالايميل اذا عفوا بالايميل اذا بده يعمل معه مقابله، بده يدعيه لندوه الى اخره. اذا هذا شيء هام اني اذكره. وبالاضافه لذلك، وهون راح تقريبا انهي لانه ما بدي اخذ من وقت النقاش، في انجن بحث كثير متطور عندنا. اذا بنحط كلمه مثلا لاجئ، أنا نفسي لاجئ فبهتم بموضوع اللاجئين، رح تلاقوا بأنه طلع لنا مجموعة من الأبحاث محطوط بها الأبحاث إذا كان بالاسم باسم في كلمة لاجئ، أو إذا كان بالكيورد في موضوع اللاجئ لاجئ، وفيها وبتطلع بالانجليزي بالفرنسي وبالهذا. يعني نحن رابطين الكيوردز مع بعضها. راح فرجيكم اخر عفوا هي بدنا نحط لاجئ لانه حطينا هيك. راح تلاقوا مشاريع موجوده بالانجليزي، شيء بالفرنسي، شيء وهكذا، وبالعربي. يعني بمعنى رابطين الكيوردز بحيث انه نمكن اي واحد. مثلا عندنا تقريبا 22 مشروع بحثي بتناول موضوع اللاجئين. اذا الهدف الحقيقه هو ليس مبروك مثلا بطقطقة هو كأكاديمي يفوت عليه، بس نحن مصممينه الوزارات تفوت عليه. يعني لازم ندعو الباحث بأنه شو هي الوسيلة البسيطة يلي بدك تحكي مع متخذين القرار ومع المجتمع المدني. يعني كيف بتكتب شيء بحيث بسهولة يصلوا لنتائج بحثك. وراح وقفهم.
شكرا لي. شكرا ساري. وانا هلا راح I will pass it on للياس.
شكرا لجميع المحاضرين والمحاضرات على هذه المداخلات القيمة والشائقة. الآن نفتح باب النقاش. لدينا تقريبا نصف ساعة لهذا النقاش المفتوح. سنطرح ما استطعنا زميلتي وندى وأنا من أسئلة فيما تبقى من وقت من زوم ومن فيسبوك. سنطرحها كما وردت عمليا بلغتها، باستثناء التعليقات والأسئلة الواردة باللغة الإسبانية. اسمحوا لي طبعا أن أعرضها وأن أطرحها باللغة العربية من باب تعميم الفائدة وتعميم المعرفة كما تحمل هذه الحلقة أصلا، يعني عنوانها. السؤال الأول سأطرحه على دكتور راجي أسعد باللغة العربية. دكتور راجي لو سمحت، ولكن أترك لك طبعا حرية الإجابة باللغة التي ترتئيها. كيف يمكن تطوير آليات وتقنيات البحث المعلوماتي في مجال البحث الاجتماعي في ظل التحديات الاجتماعية المعاصرة؟ والشق الثاني من السؤال: وكيف يمكن تعميم تقنيات البحث المعلوماتي في ظل ضعف تعميم هذه الأدوات والتقنيات الإعلاميات؟
شكرا على السؤال. يعني هو سؤال طبعا واسع جدا وصعب، لكن يعني أنا شايف إنه الوطن العربي ومن هم مسؤولين عن إتاحة البيانات في الوطن العربي بيكونوا حريصين ان هم يتماشوا مع ما يحصل في باقي العالم. فلازم اول حاجه نوري انه اللي بيحصل في باقي العالم يعني ماشي ازاي، على اساس ان احنا ما نتخلفش عن ذلك. فلما ورينا مثلا انه في قواعد بيانات، ده كل البلاد معظم بلاد العالم مشتركين فيها من ناحيه بيانات التعدادات، ورحنا بذلك الى من هم منتجي التعدادات في البلاد العربيه، كثير منهم رضي ان هو يشترك في هذه قواعد البيانات. فيعني احنا بنحط ما هي الاكسبكتيشنز، ما هو متوقع منهم علشان يتماشوا مع العالم. وبعدين اللي بيحصل انه الحكومات، حتى الحكومات اللي هي مغلقه نوعا ما، بتحس ان هي يجب عليها انها تنفتح وتصدر البيانات بتاعتها بطريقه عامه. لكن انا شايف انه يعني يمكن احاول just use the English. Learning by example is really the main way that we can make this possible in the region.
Thank you, Ragi. Thank you. Now I have a question to Klaxo.
Excuse me, could I add that data training is also available from both the ERF and from the Arab Council for the Social Sciences. The ACSS is holding data management and data analysis training workshops, as the ERF has done also for a number of years. And if you follow the ACSS website, the announcement for these workshops comes up regularly. They're held every several months, and now they're being held virtually, so not even involving travel. They also encourage people to learn how to prepare their data sets for publication with the ACSS Dataverse. I'm sorry to interrupt. I wanted to add to Dr. Assad's wonderful answer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No, thank you, Charles. Yeah, more specifically, the next workshop will be held in May, end of May and early June. So you can check it on our website. Now I have a question to Klaxo. It's not mine, it came from the audience. Do you feel that open source publications have an appeal to young scholars, among young scholars, until open access becomes a wide-scale social movement and more acceptable? Do you have any suggestions for young scholars who are building their publication record, are concerned about visibility, and may not be keen on open access journals so early in their careers? This is to Klaxo.
Thank you for the question. This generation, this digital generation, is open by default. I mean, they live in open spaces, and in the web they navigate. The problem is they are in tension because they live in an academic transition from closed to open. In a research assessment system that will slowly make the transition from closed to open, from closed in Web of Science and Scopus to open for more diversity of indexing information to evaluate researchers. So our recommendation to our young researchers is to reply the question that Sadi and Afi asked. Which is our audience? Are we writing for a group of researchers in another region and we are only writing in English and publishing in mainstream journals? Do we need to address to our local audience because it's a problem in our country and we want to establish a dialogue with that audience? So we recommend that the young researchers look at the research assessment system. What do they reward for tenure and promotion? And take care to publish in those venues that are rewarded, but also to publish in their local language, in the local quality journals, and train in open science practices, because open science will be much more multilingual and bibliodiverse than the present scholarly communication system. So they will grow, this younger generation will grow with more openness and more possibilities to be multilingual and bibliodiverse in their publishing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nada, if possible, I would like to respond to the question about the strategies to promote change.
Of course.
For Claxo. Well, as I mentioned before, FOLEC and Claxo deals with a multi-scale strategy to promote this research assessment transformation. We expect to enlarge the different profiles of researchers, not only in the main criteria, but also related with vinculation, with training at postgraduate education, and also revaluing the activities that have to do with editing tasks within university and other institutions. And basically, the great advantage is that FOLEC is in dialogue with national research councils, with academic communities, with community-led initiatives, yes, from the bottom of our societies, and also with editors. So what we are trying to search for and to promote is the need of diverse indicators, yes, as Dominique and I mentioned before, the databases that are interoperable, so that our research systems have more elements, more information to open a variety of different alternatives as regards research evaluation, and also to provide, we are working on that in a research project currently, to provide also a qualitative research assessment experiences and alternatives in order to include them in our research systems and institutions. So it's a big challenge, but with all these dialogues, procedures, information, we are trying to change this also academic culture in our institutions. So thank you very much.
Thank you. سؤال موجه الآن باللغة العربية إلى الدكتور مبروك. من خلال تجربتكم في موقعكم، هل تلمسون اهتماما في محور دون سواه من المحاور التي يعرضها الموقع، وذلك من طرف الزائرين والزائرات؟
شكرا إلياس. ربما هناك تركيز أكثر في الكتابات الأنثروبولوجية في العالم العربي عموما على مواضيع التراث والدين، باعتبارهما تيمتان أساسيتان للبحث الأنثروبولوجي في عالمنا العربي، وبالتالي سنجد هذا الأمر يعني أثر على الموقع، وربما أكثر المواضيع الموجودة في الموقع تنتمي لهاتين الفئتين. وهذا الاهتمام ربما مرجعه إلى أنه لا يزال هناك نوع من الربط في العالم العربي بين الأنثروبولوجيا ودراسة المجتمعات القديمة أو التقليدية أو بين قوسين يعني البدائية، وإن كنا يعني هناك اعتراض على هذا المصطلح. هذا من جهة، ومن جهة ثانية ربما لا أدري في باقي الدول العربية، لكن في الجزائر على وجه الخصوص الأنثروبولوجيا يعني إعادة ولادة الأنثروبولوجيا في الألفية الجديدة بعد أن كانت ممنوعة يعني لسنوات طويلة من الحقل الجامعي، إعادة الولادة هذه تمت في حضن معاهد الثقافة الشعبية، وبالتالي الذين اشتغلوا على الثقافة الشعبية هم الذين اشتغلوا على الأنثروبولوجيا، وإلى حد الساعة يعتبر التراث والثقافة الشعبية يعني التيمة الأساسية للدراسات الأنثروبولوجية خاصة في الجزائر والمغرب العربي عموما. شكرا.
شكرا مبروك. Now we have a question for Charles Kurzman. Can you tell us more about the global Dataverse networks? What do they aim at achieving, and how successful are they in networking data institutions and amplifying data from the global south?
The Dataverse network is spreading quickly. There are more and more sites, organizations joining this network every year. And the growth is greatest, the rate is greatest in the global south. Because the software is free and because it is maintained by the developers primarily at Harvard University, there is relatively low barriers to access, to entry, to join this network. However, most of the sites, most of the participants in this network are in the global north, and the holdings, the data set available in those archives are primarily from those locations. In other words, in the global south, nobody is coming to save you, to archive data and preserve data for you. I think the research communities have to do this preservation themselves. And fortunately, there are now tools to make that increasingly easy to do. However, it is still a collective enterprise that research communities need to take on themselves.
Thank you. دكتور لورا، لدينا سؤال أو تعليق على شكل سؤال باللغة الإسبانية. اسمحي لي أن أقرأه باللغة العربية، خصوصاً أنك علقت وأجبت باللغة الإسبانية، تقولين أنكم تعملون في هذا أو يجب أن تعملوا في هذا الاتجاه. عالمية المعرفة أمر حتمي، وتقدم البحث في جميع العلوم من شأنه أن يسهم في قبول التنوعات واحترامها. بهذه الطريقة يمكن مواجهة العولمة المدمرة لمفهوم المجتمع والمنافع المشتركة والنزعة الإنسانية في القرن ال21، علما أنك دكتور لورا كنت علقتي وأجبتي على هذا السؤال بالإسبانية وتقولين طبعا أنا أوافق بشدة ونعمل، يجب أن نعمل في هذا الاتجاه. ما تعليقك على ذلك؟
Well, thank you for the comment. I think that we have to, from Poleg, we think we have to work in the 3 stages in the global debate. That's why we are delighted to be here, but also in the national policies and with local communities. We think that the 3 levels are very important to produce this transformation. And I just wanted to comment on one change that could be produced in one of our Latin American systems, and that is a very promising or significant change that was created. And this is the case of a resolution from the Social and Human Science National Council from Argentina, the CONICET, which is the only one in its kind, which includes Cielo and Redalig, yes, the regional repositories, among the first levels, together with WOS and Scopus, to classify journals when they assess researchers from the organism to publish. Yes, so the resolution is now under debate in order to modify it in a wider orientation. But we think that, for example, this change has a national, local, regional impact, and we hope also could make more visible our production and to circulate Latin American production internationally. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Laura. Now there is a question to Dr. Ragi Asad. Beyond access, can you talk about the status of training on use of data? In general, are students in our region trained in their academic institutions to use the data? Are there programs or initiatives to train them?
Yes, this is an excellent question. I think I found from my experience that people will, that the training in methods is generally in universities tend to be very abstract and theoretical and not applied empirical training because there were no data sets. But now as data sets become available, there is this expression that if you build it, they will come. That basically once you have data available, then the universities start using these data sets to train students on empirical methods. And then organizations like ERF also organized a number of training courses to analyze data, in particular, and to give grants for people who are going to use particular data sets. So a lot of these things can start happening once the data becomes available. But if the data is not available, then nobody feels like there is a point in investing in training. I feel that the training and the human capacity and the research workshops where researchers get together to learn from each other, etc., happen the moment you create the infrastructure. And then people will start using it and these resources develop. And there's been a considerable amount that has happened in the fields in which the data has become available for some years and has been available in a dependable and sustainable way, not just as a one-time initiative.
Thank you. دكتور ساري حنفي، السؤال موجه إليك. ثمة هوة كبيرة بين الواقع والأكاديميا وأحد أسبابها الطبقية. كثيرون في الأكاديميا هم أيضا من الأغنياء وبالذات في العلوم الاجتماعية. ما تعليقك على ذلك ولماذا التركيز على اللاجئين مثلا؟ هل لأن هناك تمويلا؟ دكتور ساري هل تسمعنا؟
ايه هلا عم بسمعك، انا اسف.
طيب سأكرر السؤال. نعم. السؤال هو ثمة هوة كبيرة بين الواقع والأكاديميا وأحد أسبابها الطبقية. كثيرون في الأكاديميا هم أيضا من الأغنياء وبالذات في العلوم الاجتماعية. لماذا التركيز؟ ما تعليقك أولا على هذه المقاربة؟ وثانيا لماذا التركيز على اللاجئين مثلا؟ هل لأن هناك تمويلا؟
أول شيء شكرا جزيلا، وأنا آسف الإنترنت ضعيف عندي فمش هقدر أحط الصورة. لا، أول شغلي فعلا العالم الأكاديمي هو عالم بيعكس كثير المجتمع، وبالتالي العالم الأكاديمي فيه بيعكس المجتمع بما فيه السلطات. بمعنى إذا مجتمع فيه لا تكافؤ اجتماعي، غالبا الأكاديمية مع كل أسف بتعكس ذلك. إذا في عندنا مشكلة في العالم العربي في ذلك، ولكن كمان لازم ندرس العالم الأكاديمي على إنه في له استقلالية نسبية، على طريقة بيير بورديو كيف يدرس الحقل. يعني الحقل الأكاديمي كمان له آلياته بتفاعل أعضائه مع بعضها، مش بالضرورة يطبق النموذج تحليلي يلي بنطبقه على حقل آخر، حقل الاقتصاد، حقل البنية الاجتماعية، حقل الديني إلى آخره. إذا هي نقطة حابب أقولها، بأنه في الحقيقة بشكل عام أي إسقاطات سريعة على الحقل الأكاديمي غالبا ما بتعطي نتائج هامة، ما بتفهمنا شو عم بيصير. هلا أنا فقط حطيت كلمة لاجئين، فينا نحط كلمة تجارة إلكترونية، فينا نحط كلمة الصحة النفسية إلى آخره. إذا بوابة أثر تتناول موضوعات مختلفة وليس فقط موضوع اللاجئين. الآن ليش في موضوع اللاجئين؟ لأنه في تمويل، أنا ما بخالف من ذكر ذلك. برأيي موضوع اللاجئين موضوع كثير خطير بمجتمعات كلها عم بتهاجر، واللجوء ظاهرة كبيرة. إذا أخذنا اللاجئين الفلسطينيين اللاجئين السوريين بنشكل أكبر جماعة بشرية عن اللاجئين، وبالتالي وجود دراسات اجتماعية بيسهل بالعكس اتخاذ قرارات سليمة فيما يتعلق باستقبالهم، بدمجهم إلى آخره.
شكرا
في أحكي أكثر من هيك بس رح أوقفهم.
شكرا دكتور ساري.
شكرا دكتور ساري. There's a question for Dominique and Laura. Clearly, Latin America has achieved a great deal of success in promoting alternative community-led nonprofit publishing, as well as changing evaluation criteria. Is there resistance from universities or any academic communities? And what are some strategies we can use to convince universities in the Arab region to consider such alternatives to global ranking systems?
Thank you, Setene Shami, for the question, and we agreed with Laura that I would reply. It's a very interesting question. In our region, where open access is scholarly led, and universities are the main publishers of journals in our region. So the resistance is not in the university, because universities want contents in their journals to be rewarded and to be valued in the research assessment procedures. The resistance that we find is in the funding agencies, in the national research councils and funding agencies, because they are oriented by the main indicators of the commercial sector, Web of Science and Scopus. But we think that we are living a very interesting moment, because the Global Research Council, which gathers the main funders of the world, and the International Science Council, which gathers all the science community of the world, they are both working on the issues of reviewing the research evaluation, so it is more a responsible research evaluation that considers many of the issues mentioned by Laura. So when Setene Shami asked, well, what would we say to our partner organization, ACSS, we would say, well, take that umbrella, the umbrella of the Global Research Council Responsible Research Assessment, and take the International Science Council new initiative to work on research evaluation, and that is the umbrella to change within our regions. Because if the global voices of funders and the global voices of science say that we have to include more voices in our platform, that we have to change research evaluation to be more inclusive and participative, then we are going to change within our regions.
Thank you.
دكتور لورا، أبقى معك بسؤال وتعليق باللغة الإسبانية، أيضا سأقرأه باللغة العربية، وأطلب إليك رجاء أن تجيبي باللغة الإنجليزية. من الجيد معرفة أن الاهتمام بالاطلاع على المعلومات المتاحة حول المساهمات الأنثروبولوجية قد ازداد في المنطقة وفي العالم برمته. إلى أي مدى يساهم ذلك في تحسين التكامل الاجتماعي والثقافي العالمي؟
Shall I respond in English or in Spanish? It was not clear.
In English, please, if you don't mind.
In English. Okay. Well, as Dominique mentioned before, there is quite a wide interest in what Latin America and the Caribbean is doing as regards a model of open access, but also following the alternatives that we are building as regards research assessment. So we think that with all these changes that we are promoting, that we are promoting from our region, it could be a good chance to show the world another model of knowledge production and circulation. But in order to do that, we need to strengthen our policies, to invest in databases, to invest in better conditions for our editors at universities, which are the ones that are conducting and sustaining all this public model, basically public model, but with threats of commercial alternatives in our region. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have a question for Sari. What has been your experience with your portal? Are researchers enthusiastic or hesitant to post their research publicly and to make themselves accessible to journalists and others?
شكرا كثير للسؤال. في الحقيقة سامعيني؟ والله سامعيني؟
اتفضل.
تفضل.
في الحقيقة رحنا للمرحلة الثانية من أثر، لأنه برأينا إنه في إشكال كبير ما زال إنه نقنع الباحثين بإنه يوسعوا مجال أثرهم البحثي بما يتجاوز النشر الأكاديمي، يلي مع كل أسف كثير من الجامعات بتطلع عليه فقط عندما تأخذ قرار بالترقية. إذن في إشكال بنيوي مؤسساتي بكثير مناطق بالعالم بما فيها العالم العربي. لهذا نحن بدنا نحاول لهذا المرحلة الثانية هي تدريب الأكاديميين كيف بيكتبوا بصفحات الرأي، كيف يحولوا مقالتهم الأكاديمية إلى مقالة محلية، لأنه فعلا أنا بعتبر بأنه في مقاومة للانفتاح على المجتمع المدني والتحدث مع الناس والتحدث مع المستفيدين مباشرة. في إشكال حقيقي بالعالم العربي. فلهذا أنا أنادي بهذا الأثر رح يمد إيده للباحثين يقول له حتى فينا نحن نساعدكم وندربكم إلى آخره. إذا مضبوط الكلام، في إشكال بكل معنى الكلمة.
ممتاز. شكرا دكتور ساري. دقيقة واحدة تفصيلنا عن انتهاء الوقت هذه الحلقة الشائقة. طبعا نكتفي بهذا القدر من الأسئلة. شكرا للمحاضرين والمحاضرات وللميسرة ولجميع من انضم إلينا عبر زوم وفيسبوك، وطبعا للمترجمات الأربع اللواتي رافقننا مع ترجمة فورية إلى العربية والإنجليزية والإسبانية، وفي طبيعة الحال لجميع من ساهم في إنجاح هذا أو هذه الحلقة من الشركاء وطبعا من جميع المحاضرين والمحاضرات. هذه الحلقة سيعاد بثها على صفحة المجلس في فيسبوك وعلى قناته في يوتيوب Arab Council for the Social Sciences، وفي هذه الأثناء ننشر في خانة الدردشة أو تشات عبر زوم وفي تعليق كومنت في فيسبوك رابطا لرزنامة حلقات النقاش العشر وطبعا السبع المتبقية حتى تشرين الثاني نوفمبر المقبل. موعدنا يتجدد في حلقة النقاش الرابعة في 10 من أيار مايو المقبل. جميع تفاصيل هذه الحلقة ننشرها قريبا على منصاتنا الاجتماعية فيسبوك وتويتر وعلى موقعنا الإلكتروني theacss.org. إلى حينها شكرا مجددا. Thank you so much. Muchas gracias وإلى الملتقى.
Thank you.
شكرا للجميع. Thank you everyone.
شكرا.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye bye.